Hey Heather.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, I just sent Liz the invite, so hopefully.
Oh,
Hey.
hey, Liz.
Can you hear me okay on my. Okay, let's make sure.
Yeah. Is it me cutting out or is it you guys?
It could have been me. I don't know.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Are we good? Okay. Just checking.
And yeah, I can't hear you, Molly.
I hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, it was my makeshift production cable. It was covering my microphone.
I love it.
Thanks, Chauncey. Okay, well, I think we can give it a few minutes before we get going. But I thought I might just while we're waiting for people to log on, maybe show this piece.
I'm gonna just move a little. Yeah. Or yeah.
Waiting.
Yeah. I love that piece.
Me too. So good. And then I'm gonna mosey on over here. I love this one.
Mm-hmm.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel weird saying I love it because it's our work, but I'm just like, I love it.
I mean, I do think that's a thing, though. I think it's easy to say that because I feel like not totally responsible for it.
Yeah.
You know, there's this lack of ownership, but at the same time, full ownership, where you're like, wow, and you're like, did that sound rude?
No, it doesn't. I say. So can you guys still hear me? I keep trying to put it down on the stand, but I think it's gonna block the sound if I do. So
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the introductions, and I'll start with Heather. Heather is here with the lovely red hair on the left of your screen. So Heather's work is inspired by her community, her travels, and the beauty of everyday life. She enjoys working with her hands, creating works notable for their deft finish and tactile nature. Her visual art has been exhibited at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, the Wiregrass Museum of Art, the Georgian Clark Alabama Artist Gallery, Low Mill, and many others. In addition to art shows in Alabama, she's participated in juried festivals and exhibitions in Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, West Virginia, and Missouri. You're busy. She also holds over 20 years of design and production experience in stage, television, and film. Her credits include the Cherry Lane Theater, the Theater Outlet, the Santa Fe Opera, the Los Angeles Opera, many more. Heather also holds a BFA in costume design and is currently, or you have finished your MFA, right? So this file is I will say I didn't know that about you until going through your bio. I didn't realize that you had this stage costume design background. So that's really cool. And I love how you've used that in your current practice.
Yeah, and I think just to build on what you've already said, and thank you for reading all that. I'm like, wow, that sounds like I know something. Yeah, my original introduction to art was theater, and so I did costume design and costume rendering and working with my hands, flat patterning and draping. That's how I started in art. And so that's really such an interesting place for us to start with this exhibition because theater is so collaborative. I mean, it's just a collaborative process from the beginning to the end. And so when I really kind of put myself into doing visual art as an occupation, probably in maybe about 10 years ago, I really have not done a lot of collaborative. I was trying to look through my history of collaborations and there's a piece here and a piece there. But this idea of really collaborating completely on a project, this is the first time in visual art that I have done it in a way that is so wholly submerged, where we're just both working on every piece together. start to finish, there's no one person. And like, while the percentages kind of swap, I feel like we both 100% put ourselves into each piece, which was like I was so grateful to Liz for like going with me on it and not being like, this is a crazy idea, we should not do this.
Well, I didn't say it like that. If anything, I'm like, that is crazy, but let's go for it. Yeah, nothing to lose.
For sure. So yeah, so that's my background. And then more recently, I got my MFA, and that's how I met Liz. We were in our cohort together. And so a lot of my work is about the body, about skin, about cloth, how we cover it, what we do with that cloth, how we encode that cloth to kind of present an image, and how does that image differ from what is internal. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll go into Liz. May I call you Liz?
Yeah, of
or
course.
do you want me to? Okay.
No, Liz is fine.
Okay. Elizabeth Rennie is an emerging mixed media painter and UX designer based in her hometown, Lawrence, Massachusetts. Focusing on the documentation of human experiences and emotions, her work allows her to explore the relationships between color, material, and physical environments. Liz attended Suffolk University, receiving a BFA in graphic design, and recently received her MFA in visual arts at the Lesley University. She currently exhibits her work in local galleries in the greater Boston and Merrimack Valley. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And actively participates in Lawrence's artistic community. Her work is a recipient of awards and exhibitions, including the 2021 Art Off the Wall by the Brookline Art Center and the 2021 Emerging Artists exhibition by the Cambridge Arts Association. While making art is a focal point of Liz's interest, in her spare time, she also enjoys collecting vinyl, listening to DIY punk bands, and overindulging in coffee and burritos.
Yes.
I can relate.
I already started laughing, so I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about this part of that.
But also, this isn't up to date either, because you're not based in Massachusetts, really, right? So you're also
sorry, I'm cutting you off. Yeah, I still am technically, but I do spend a lot of time as well in San Diego, California, which is where I am at currently. But yeah,
so
I am still technically bi-coastal is what some of my friends like to call it. Yeah, which is a great experience.
So after just kind of going through those introductions, I think if you want to start, Heather, and talk about just your own individual practice, and I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, and your origin story with costume design and everything, and how that's led to your visual arts practice. But yeah, if you want to talk about that, and then whenever you finish, we can just go into Liz's individual practice and kind of explore both of those.
For sure. Yeah, I think my individual practice started probably in like 2014, 2015. I started doing very illustrative 2D work. I was just like looking to get better at painting. And then slowly, like over time, I started doing like the White Tent Festival circuit. And at the time, I have 3 kids and they were pretty small. And so I was doing things that I could do like at night or on the weekends or before they woke up in the morning. And I was painting things that were like super everyday, like the things in our lives, our bikes, our popsicles, our cardinals at our feet. And that slowly turned into like a bigger practice. And over time, I basically went from having like a little desk in my house to a little garage studio to applying to be in Low Mill as a studio artist. I moved into Low Mill. I'll never forget this. I couldn't paint the things that I was painting when I was in my house with my kids. I was like having the worst like painter's block or whatever you would call it. And the director of the mill, Marcia, came in and she was like, what did you think was going to happen? Like when you changed your complete environment and work practice, you didn't think that the stuff you were making would change? And it was like this light bulb in my head of like, oh, I could do any kind of art. And so basically over time, I spent more time figuring out how to kind of incorporate fiber into my work. And then eventually I left the 2D almost altogether and worked completely in fiber because I had been like having this practice of costume design where basically you're creating a complete persona out of fiber. You're kind of taking away the actor's own persona and giving them a whole new thing to put on. And so when I started grad school, which is when I met Liz, that really became the thrust of what my work became about. Like, what is this cloth we cover ourselves with? What inches of our skin do we cover? And what does that say? How are we like giving a message through that? And so that is where my visual practice kind of started in grad school. And I really just have done a deep dive into that. Yeah. What about you, Liz?
And I was like, okay, should I jump in here? Yeah, I mean, I feel like my practice has always been rooted in exploring my anxiety and how I address my anxiety. Initially, when I started my practice 5 years ago, it was still very much based in design work because it was hard for me to break out of that realm of control and balance. And I think I've gotten now to a point where I've realized that that balance and control is still rooted in honesty. Like I need that in order to mitigate against a constant state of panic and anxiety and fear. And while I think it was a struggle for me initially, it is how I really inform my work now, which is why in this body of work, you see so much of that like control and what have you, like grids and what, that type of stuff. And I was always so curious between like Heather and I's work because while obviously your work addresses the external and the skin and like the box that we're given, mine is more of a reflection of the internal. And how do we let those like internal struggles that we deal with on a regular basis live outside of us? So there's this weird like dialogue and connection that happens between our work that I think is just so fun. And I really, I not only have I enjoyed exploring it in this project, but I think it can keep going for sure.
For sure. And I think I love the way that you think, like we both were trained as designers. So I was, all of our like formal design training is so similar. And so instantly we were like in our relationship together, not only as like people, but as artists. And we both like instantly, even though we used different tools, spoke the exact same design language. And so it became like almost a shorthand with us because we shared this same sort of design knowledge. So I think that was like exciting to me at onset to think like, oh, Liz speaks my language. She speaks it with different tools, but we are definitely in the same vein.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because when you look at your work, it's more muted. It's just as large as mine too, which I want to keep exploring that. But it's just like it's almost the unapologetic way of describing our bodies. Like this is what it is. This is the reality of it. And mine is the same, but in a more aggressive way. Like this is what it is, and you're going to accept it. You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah. Do you think? And I think like it's so interesting because like in each piece, those sort of design ideas and those color concepts and those forms just play out like a little differently. And I feel like as we kind of like look through the pieces, there's some places where like the subtext is me, but the text is you. And then when you flip in other pieces, it's the opposite. And then some it's like 50-50. It was just like interesting to have a whole body and just work through all of those like design commonalities, but material, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the materials were so different. So like the asynchronicity of the materials, but then the like commonality of the language and the ideas. Yeah, for sure.
So do you think that was kind of one of my questions is like, where do your practices converge and, are there like distinctive threads? And I feel like you just kind of already established that. So basically the language that you have is the same, but the tools that you're using are different. How do you think, so like Liz was saying that she's sort of dealing with the interpersonal where, Heather, you're working more with like on the outside, the way that things look. How do you think, how was it to combine those practices with this body of work? Like, were there certain areas that you struggled with? Did you learn from each other? I recently was talking to two artists. It was a mother and daughter, and basically the daughter taught the mother to like think out of the box. Like everything doesn't have to be perfect, and it could be messy, and it doesn't have to make sense. And then the mother taught the daughter just like the basics of quilting. And so I thought that was interesting. And whenever I was looking over your work in this talk, I was thinking, I wonder, what did you teach each other?
Nothing. No, we did.
You go first, Liz, and then I'm going to tell a story.
I want to know what the story is. I feel like for me, and this is just, I know Heather taught me something. It's not coming to my mind, but the first thing I thought of was when we were working on these pieces, I think Heather had a more like, I had an idea that things had to be clean and a little bit more precise. But my work is so much about like, no, like it's about the gross realities of the everyday and mental health. And it's not always going to be perfect, but it's about accepting that. So kind of like forcing Heather to let go of like the technicalities. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. Because that's how I see it. I'm like, listen, we're all balls of anxiety and it's fine, you know?
Yes, and that's exactly what my story is. We when we first started working, the process for working was we started just throwing each other images that we liked, images that I saw that I was like, I feel like this feels like Liz. She would throw me images. We started boards. We started Google Drive. And then there became a time, like as we were getting closer, that it was like, okay, we've got to start doing things. So I sent Liz a bunch of materials in the mail and she started messing with those. And then those informed like images she was putting into the drive. So it was very digital. And so it became like really obvious, since I'm the one in Alabama and she's in California and Massachusetts, that the physical work had to originate with me. And I was like incredibly intimidated by that, because I kept thinking like, what if I pick the wrong shape or the wrong size or the wrong material or the wrong, and this is like, okay, look, I'm just going to give you some digital images, just replicate them. Like just look at the colors, look at the form and do it. And so I took the frames that we had and started it. And like, I did like hours. Like, I think my first day I did those like ridiculous artist sessions where you spend like 6 or 8 hours in the studio, just like 100% music blasting, doing the thing. And at the end of the day, I was like, I don't feel like myself. It's like the oddest thing. And I took all the pictures and sent them to Liz. And I was like, this is where I started. And her response was like, oh my God, that's great. So it was like such an interesting thing, because it was like, I was like back to paint, which is where I started, and back to bright colors. And I had been so muted. I was like only looking at body colors for like years, like skin and veins and eyes. And so like to like hot pink, we still laugh about hot pink.
Yeah. That's how like I think this whole show originated at, because I distinctly remember saying to you once, I just want to take one of your pieces and dip it in hot pink.
Yeah.
And just from that, we just were like thinking of all the ways we could interject our practices. And so sorry about the hot pink, but I think it was a necessary evil.
It was so good. Yeah. And then like slowly over time, I would send more pictures. And then like sometimes she would draw on the picture, like what she wanted me to do in the piece. I'm like, does this have to be paint, or can I do this with thread? Like, does this need to be? And so the other thing that we did practice-wise is I started collecting things. I'm like already an art hoarder. And so I started this box of things of pieces of things I dyed, pieces of things I'd embroidered. I just started a whole box that was like box for Liz. And so when she finally got into town, there was just like this like explosion of like, okay, here's all my things. We just laid them out on the table. Here's all the pieces that I started. And I was like, I'm going to back up and literally like get crazy. And that's how like, it was just, it was so cool. It was so cool.
I think an interesting point to add to that, Tara, is it really taught us how to communicate effectively in a way that I'm not used to. Because I'm used to just, it's, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Natural. I put things on a canvas or a wall, whatever it might be, and it's intuitive. That's the word. But because we're working differently, none of the things we were doing was intuitive to us. So we had to like explain that process to each other, which I think we did remarkably well. But that was like a really interesting like skill that I wasn't expecting to develop through this process.
Yeah.
So how long was the planning digitally and, you know, remotely? How long did that take?
That was the lion's share of the work for sure. I mean, we were talking about this. When did we contact you for the first time, Holly? Was it like December? You and I talked in December, I think.
Time's a blur, but it was definitely last year.
Yeah. It was like at the end of last year. And then we were not physically in the space together with the pieces until in the month before we came down in January or June. In June. Was it June?
Yeah, last
May.
week in June. But
May. That's when we physically got together.
Yeah.
But to go back to
you
like our process, like it's amazing that I only spent 1 week with those pieces physically. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't even make sense to me, but yeah.
Literally, like my family's like, are you, and my friends are like, are you gonna let Liz out of the studio or did you lock her in there? I'm like, yeah, there were some long days for sure. Yeah. But it was necessary because even though we were digital, I still think even like with Instagram and Zoom, and there is something about physically being in the presence of a piece of art
Of course, yeah.
that you think differently than if you see a picture of it. Like so I'm like, her response to it in person to me was so important. I kept thinking when she gets here, just let her be with the pieces alone for a while, because I've been living with them physically and she's been living with them digitally for so long. She has to like introduce herself to them and like make friends or enemies.
You know what that reminds me of? The first time we saw each other in person, and it was like, oh, get in the car. Like it wasn't even like we or just meeting. It was like we knew each other for years, and that's kind of how I felt when I was introduced to the pieces. I'm like, oh, I already have so much familiarity with what these are. It just felt it was a duck to water, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was.
So that was actually one of my questions was like expectations versus reality. Like when you Liz, when you got with the pieces where you're like, yes, this is what I was expecting, or did some of that change once you guys got together?
Some of it definitely changed naturally. I think as we both spent time with it, and maybe I manipulated a little bit, it wasn't turning out the way we thought it would be, because both of our practices rely so heavily on how we feel about something, how we're trying to engage our bodies and our minds with that thing. And it doesn't always connect, and that's fine. But I think going back to what we were saying, like the fact that we were able to kind of create these works in our minds beforehand, it really did help aid me in finding my familiarity with those pieces. A lot of the pieces, not all of them, but a good amount of them.
And I think that's a super important and interesting thing to talk about, because there were pieces that were going to be part of the show that neither of us could make, that we just couldn't finish. And like, they're in a pile right now here in my home studio. But it was like, let's just each grab a piece that we're most interested in resolving and work on that and then put it down. And that's like the way I work. I tend to be like a plate spinner. And I don't know about you, Liz. Like I always have lots of pieces going and I'll work on a piece till I can't stand it anymore or it's done with me. And I'll put it down and move to another piece and then another piece. And then I come back and I'm a different person when I come back to it and I'm ready to do something else.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I function the same way.
Like partly having all the pieces laid out on the table when we weren't working on them and then going back and forth. I think that was interesting. And being able to like edit and go, this one is just like not coming to life. We are like full CPR arting this piece and it is dead. and
that's okay, right?
That's like part of the process.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, I'm always saying if you're not with the work, it's going to show up. If we had like finished one of those pieces, but we didn't feel connected to it, you would have noticed. So like I was perfectly fine with being like, hey, this is not a piece for this. Maybe it's for later when we do feel emotionally and intellectually, economically connected to it, whatever it might be. But yeah.
So whenever you first approached me about the show, I wasn't necessarily picturing like a full collaboration. Like I was thinking there'll be some pieces from Liz, there'll be some pieces from Heather, and then there'll be some collaborative pieces. And I was really expecting it just to be like one, on-site, site-specific installation or something. So when I realized like, oh, they're working on each piece together. And like you said, like some pieces maybe like 20% Heather and some pieces are like 50-50. Is there a particular piece that you want me to show the audience and maybe talk about a little bit and kind of describe that, you know, ratio?
Okay, go, Liz.
I think the most obvious one that is just so 50-50 is the hanger.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about that piece that I think represents us both beautifully.
Yeah, I agree with that because it has like the skin feeling, the body feeling, but it still feels empty. But there's like the structure of the hanger that's so bright. The stand that it's on, the armature it's on, feels so designed, and like the lines are so precise. It does. To me, that piece feels like us. Like, I don't know how more 50-50 you could get than that piece.
Do you want me to show that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
One everyone's seen, but we love it. So
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Sorry for the shakiness, y'all.
That's fine.
Yeah. That piece was like, and I think that might be the very first one we completed together. I feel
this is the one that came the most naturally to us for sure. Yeah.
That was like the departure point for sure. And then we have like, I think it's interesting too, in addition to the ones that like we decided like these are in and these are out. I feel like it's interesting to like look at like where we started and then where we ended up and like the parameters we gave ourselves, because we had to decide like some of these have to feel more 2D. We have to be able to transport them. We have to be able to move them from where I am to Holly, where you are, to the gallery. And they have to be able to hold up to paint, which is a very different dye specification than, you know, like they have to be able to have water added to them. They have to be able to, you know, be stiff enough that the paint can stay on them. Like all of these parameters that we had to work with also really help kind of keep the show contained to this very specific small subset of things we could do together. So that was also kind of cool to like move into that sort of collaborative space of like, what do you need and what do I?
So that particular piece, what did you bring with you, Liz? Like, surely you didn't bring that entire stand with you.
Oh
Was
no,
that
I sent her the hanger. I was like, you need to use this hanger somehow. Figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously nicer than that. But then she showed me a picture of the hanger with the cloth on it. I was like, that's done. Like that's done. Boom. Great.
We had the phone call where I was like showing her all the things like in my home studio, like any of this like lighting you up? Do you feel like I was like showing her pieces of things that had dyed, and like in the background was this garment. Basically, it's a merchandising fixture, and I had purchased it because it was like, you know, hot pink, and I thought, well, I can make that be peach really easily because the undertones of that will make it skin colored. And I bought it, and it was at the house, and I like scrolled past it, and she's like, whoa. Go back to what you just passed. I'm like, oh God, it's so fun. She's like, that's it. That's what you need to put that hanger on.
like, if you say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works. It definitely works. I can't believe you just had that.
Well, I mean, I had just gotten it. I had like ordered it because I needed something for my studio. I was thinking I was going to use it as like something that I could put pieces I was continuing to work on, not as part of the actual visuals of a piece.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. Yeah.
So
going back to the question, I am trying to think. I feel like the piece right next to it on the right is more Heather than me, but in a very like delightful way.
Right.
Which one?
Sorry. No, yeah, to the right. That piece.
Yeah.
Would you agree? I think that's more you.
Yeah,
sure.
I definitely do. And I think it has all of the things that I tend to like fall back on, like the craft and the stitching and the sewing and the skin and the stretching, and all of those things feel like part of me.
Yeah. You know, I have to interrupt you because you just sparked something. It occurred to me that both of us are trying to piece things together, but we do it so differently. But that's so interesting though, because you're talking about like like stitching and like attaching, and mine's more about like grids and like just trying to keep it compartmentalized, but that language is still there. Anyway,
I think so.
Yeah.
The piece that makes me think of is the piece with the parka with the stripes. That's like the deconstructed rain jacket.
Go back. You want me to go over there?
I think it's behind you, Molly.
It's like directly behind you.
Yeah. I think
There
it's
we
like
go.
that.
This one?
Yeah.
That too, it feels like the opposite of that. Like it feels so Liz to me. It's like it does, because I feel like it's like this very organic sort of deconstructed. It's like
we don't totally agree on every piece, for the record. Because I feel like this is more 50-50, but maybe depends on the day. But
when you did the stripes on it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is yes. Yes. It speaks to like internal and external and what we keep inside and what we put out front. And all the themes of our work.
Yes, exactly. That's what I get so much into with the stripes and the grids is what am I choosing to reveal versus what I'm trying to hide? What am I embarrassed to like talk about or see, and I don't want other people to see it. Which we're both trying to do.
The license plate piece is very Liz.
That was me. I will agree. That is a me piece for sure.
It has like all the things.
Love it. I love it because it's like, again, it's compartmentalized. Like it's clean and it's safe, and this is where I can control the space. But then there's the section that I've completely lost control over, and it's always that dichotomy of like, what is it that I want to reveal versus what I don't? What am I hiding versus what I'm not?
Yeah. And like you can tell right away, like I did like the very gestural movement-based chaos side. And I remember having multiple arguments about it and going, really? Really?
I am an agent of chaos, Heather. You know this.
Yes, that piece. That was great.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I definitely think the parka piece, it does feel very 50-50 to me.
Yes.
And I didn't prove it, but I can definitely see both of you very strongly. So I wanted to tell the audience, if there's any comments or any questions, feel free to include them in the comment box and we can just get to them. In the meantime, are there any other pieces that I'm just like looking around here? Can we talk about my favorite piece?
Yes, please.
You don't even know which one it is.
I don't.
I think we do.
I'm going to go to it first and then I'll just flip the camera around.
But
this one I was like, OMG.
Yes. Heather fought me on this one. She's like, it's too much. Like, I don't know. And I'm like, it's perfect. I feel
like it's a good blend of the two of you as well.
Well, and
I agree.
Version of our collaboration because the color isn't in the form of paint. And so it was like the color was my language, but it was like when I was working on it and Liz was working on it and I kept like doing things and she's like, no more. You got to do more. I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's so pink. I can't even. So it's like very different because the rectangle is very Liz based, the hot white rectangle and the black plastic and but then like the braids and the weaving and the knotting is me, just not in what I'm used to using. And so I do think that's a really fun piece.
I love it. But it's controlled chaos, as I will keep saying.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for everyone for joining us. And I'm trying to look through some of my questions. I feel like we really talked. I think the two of you really went through a lot of my talking points that I was going to ask anyway, kind of organically. So, but it's been a pleasure working with both of you, and I'm so glad that it came together. I hope maybe we can have a part 2.
Oh, maybe
that would be fun and see how that shapes up. I also think that almost just listening to the two of you and just watching the process, it feels like a kind of like a great learning exercise,
For
like
sure.
I feel like it had to strengthen your practices individually, and like the critical thinking part of it and the communicating part of it, it almost seems like a nice exercise that I feel like I should give to other artists.
For sure. I highly recommend it, because I mean, I know when we said collaborative, people were thinking maybe 50-50, whatever, but we really wanted to push ourselves into merging the ideas that were so closely related anyways. And I agree. I would love to continue trying to explore that.
Yeah. And we definitely, in the future, show that we'll put a piece together again in October. And so it'll be interesting to see how we'll do it. You know, now that we've done this one, like, how will we do it differently? Like, maybe it goes the other way where Liz starts physically and I come in second.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'd love to see how that.
I will say installation this time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna push us
A
to do
large
that.
scale installation. We need the time for it. Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
So we've got 2 questions. First question is, what would be a good material to simulate a scar on skin? I'm assuming that's for you, Heather.
Yeah, for Heather.
So
Sure.
I just think, like, how I think about materials and picking materials is like, well, what is a scar? Well, a scar is just the skin that has been ripped apart and sewn. So I think, okay, well, any material that you push to the point of where it is breaking down, and then any way you join it back together, feels like that would look like a scar. And I think I would just start with like materials that don't stretch too much, you know, and then I'd try a material that did stretch, and then I would, you know, try stitching it, and then I'd try gluing it, and then I'd, you know, and I would just like do what that does to try to make it happen. I mean, as far as like a scar, I mean, that's, I don't know if that answers the question. Back that question, if I wanted it to look like a scar.
Well, I think this piece over here, it definitely looks like the body and sort of like stitched and
Like a knit, like a jersey knit, like a t-shirt or pantyhose. Like, I especially think of pantyhose, like runs and pantyhose. To me, if you stretch that over something, that to me looks like a scar.
yeah.
So I like it because knit is already a stretchable material. It would probably do that pretty well. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is, what's the overall message or through line of your collaboration? And we can end on that note.
I mean, I'll say that one thing that I'm taking away from this collaboration for sure is being able to move outside of what you think something has to be. Because again, we talk about the same language. We're talking about the body and the mind and the limitations, and some of that is self-limitations. And working with Heather on this has really pushed me further into what else could this be that I'm afraid of letting it be.
Yeah, and there's something, I feel like there's a book by Twyla Tharp called The Collaborative Habit, which is one of my like favorite books about collaboration. And it's like the idea of collaboration being like a letting go, that idea of submerge. Like if you just like jump into a pool, that moment where you're at the very bottom before you start to come up. Like, I think that is super important to this specific set of work, because it's like she had to let go of what she does, but still be vocal about it. And I had to let go of what I do, but still be vocal. It's like this perfect middle ground of like, you're almost at that spot without gravity where you're not falling, but you're not rising. And so overall, for me, of that process of like forcing myself to let go of color, or forcing myself to let go of texture, or whatever it was, that, not saying that those were just the only two, but like throughout the whole process, this idea of like, just submerge yourself into the process, into the ideas, and don't be so attached to what you think. So,
lean into the discomfort. There's something always in the discomfort of what you're doing, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking time, everyone, for attending the artist talk. And then obviously thank you too for working and being in the gallery, and then for being here tonight as well. It's really been an honor to work with both of you, and I hope we see each other a lot more, even though you're across the country.
I will always come to Dothan for you, Holly. Don't you worry.
All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful night. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.